my name's Richard. Welcome to We're Not Wizards. And this is a Getting Out and About episode, which is a new one. And you're going like, he's spitting a new one, so it's not Friends of the Show. Well, it's kind of Friends of the Show. But it's Getting Out and About, yup, because sometimes you got to get out of there and get into the open air and mingle with other people, not just people you go at the group. So joining me today is Mr. David Wright. And Mr. David Wright is from Tabletop Scotland. And what's Tabletop Scotland, may you ask? Well, Mr. David Wright's going to tell us all about Tabletop Scotland after he tells us a little bit about himself. So, hey Dave, thank you for coming on. I'm very, very good. I'm very, very good. We've known each other for a little while now.
Yes, we have. Yes,
because you are a person that partakes in the dwarf.
I am indeed. We share a dwarf from time to time.
I don't mean that just came out wrong. That's the first non-edit of the show. For everybody who's joining us for the first time, the reason that we do this is because we quite simply believe there's not enough podcasts out there about board games. There's actually only a couple of us in Scotland as well. There is us. There's the Unlucky Frog Gaming Podcast, which I believe you've been on recently, sir. You have indeed. And there's also the First Player Token, who we still haven't spoken to. It's terrible.
It is terrible.
The other reason that we do this is because there has been a plethora of board game related kind of conferences that are going to be on this year. It's almost impossible for a month not to go by where there's not going to be some kind of gathering of people who are all going to be talking about cardboard and other such related beautiful things. So when Dave said, listen, do you know what Tabletop Scotland is? And I went, no. He sat me down and he told me, and I thought, well, we had to get him on so he can tell all of you about it. But before we do that, we always like to find out a little bit of history about our latest lovely guests. So we're going to have a little peek back in the past. We're going to have a little focus on the present before we stare off into the massive queues outside the conference of the future. Do you like that?
I do.
Do you want to tell us? You've got quite a long.
I do have quite a long history. Yeah, thank you for reminding me how old I am.
What are you talking about? I'm not an old man.
The grey hair.
I'm 41. I can just call you man. But you could have called me Dave.
Oh dear. Yeah. Okay. So history. I got into the hobby when I was, I say the hobby, and I suppose I could classify that. Role-playing games was my first love, and I started role-playing at the tender age of 11, and this would have been now 33 years ago. So a while, with Dungeons & Dragons, the red box set, when it hit the UK, which was, my brother Alan got it, I then stole it from him. And the rest is history. No, I think for the first kind of 6-7 years of the hobby, I was a role player primarily. I played a bit of board games. The Games Workshop hobby kind of kicked off at that point as well, but I never got into that at all. I played Blood Bowl. I played a few of their board games like Chainsaw Warrior, but it was always role playing games I kind of went back to. And then you kind of get to an age where you think, oh, I need to go to university now, or I need to do something. So when I went to, and I find people sit in two camps. They either discover the hobby at the university or college or whatever, or they go there and then stop when they get there for a period of time. And I was in the latter camp. I just kind of stopped gaming for no real reason other than I didn't have time for it, probably because I was doing other things, which we won't go into.
Being cool. And hanging out on campus.
Absolutely. Doing all the exciting, cool stuff.
And watching the pretty people walking past, and you just throwing the red box of D&D to one side.
and yes, and wanted to be one of them or something like that. Yeah, and I think it was after uni that when I actually had money that I was like, all right, okay, I've got this hobby that I would like to rekindle. And we were living in Glasgow at the time, and I started to buy lots and lots of role-playing games and not playing them, and lots of board games and playing them irregularly. And at that point, we then decided to leave Glasgow, and I had literally, I don't know, about 200 plus role-playing books and stuff like that. And it was just like, I'm not taking all this to where we are now. And in Strother, it was just like, what's the point in that? So I got rid of it all of it. Every single part of the hobby went away. And
we need to give a little bit of silence for people to take that in.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Do you have any regrets about that at all? Do you have any?
Not really, because it's one of these things. I think what I developed at that point was it's a bit of a mantra with me is I don't stick to it all the time. I hasten to add, but I'm only going to buy something if I'm going to use it.
Yeah.
Now that's primarily aimed at the hobby, by the way, not necessarily everything in life. But board games, card games, and role playing games, I try and only buy it if I think, I can see me playing that within the next 6-12 months, something like that.
Yeah.
Although looking at my board game shelf, I do have stuff that's not been played, and I've had it for over a year. So I'm not quite sticking to that. But literally, not long after moving to where we are, I discovered a gaming group in Edinburgh, and I then started role-playing in Edinburgh every other Saturday. And it was, as I say, still role-playing at this point, and then doing a bit of board gaming now and again, but while I was with role-playing. And then we get to one of the kind of sadder moments of my hobby. I opened a game store, which is the nice, happy thing, right? A nice, happy thing.
Uh-huh.
But then 2.5 years later, I closed the Affirmation game store because it wasn't making any money. And it was really about, not long after that I was like, right, okay, this is still a part of me. This hobby is a part of me. I'd like to rekindle it. And it was through board games that I managed to do that. I still roleplay, not very often, but I still do it.
Yeah.
But board games is the primary. And as you know, and as I'm assuming most of your listeners know, board games has had such a huge growth in the last kind of 6-7 years even. The explosion of titles, the availability of them and stuff like that is just amazing. And as my shelves attest, there's lots of them out there.
Why role-playing? I mean, what is it you like about role-playing? I mean, we talk about a lot of card games all the time, and we have spoken to folk that have done like kind of, Colin told off of his LARPing tales, and we had Tracy on from Chaos Cards, talking about.
Very clear. I'm not a LARPer. Never have been. Colin's special, and you know Colin's special, and we all love him in a right way. Why role playing? I like storytelling, and I was invariably the person who would run the game because I would enjoy storytelling and reacting to the players, the other players' actions and activities.
Yeah.
And I'm a fantasy geek, so D&D, Dungeons and Dragons, is an easy thing for me to go, this is great fun. And I've played every edition of D&D. I even played D&D at Gen Con in 2014, and I hope to play it again at Gen Con this year because I'm going again.
Ooh, nice.
And it's always been a kind of core part of the hobby for me. And I have lots of D&D board games as well, funnily enough. Lords of Waterdeep, Tyrants Underdark, Salt of the Giants, stuff like that.
Do you get quite into it? I mean, are you the type of person that do you get into kind of like putting on the voices and putting on the weird faces, or do you kind of let the players make up you let them leave their imagination to it? Because I've seen two types in the club. I've seen the guys that will sit there and go, and you've entered a cave and it's covered in bees, what do you do? And then you get some people that go, well, what
that you find in caves. They're really troublesome.
I
tend to see
they always roll advantage.
Yeah, I tend to see how the players are playing because different groups, and I've run for lots of different groups, and including the members of my team for Tabletop Scotland, and the if a player wants to do that, then I'll play off it, and I'll kind of encourage them to do it as well. But it's not an important part of the hobby, not for me, at least, for role playing at least, not for me.
Yeah.
I've ran at conventions, I've ran for complete strangers, I've ran for people I've known for 20 plus years, and it's kind of like it depends really on the kind of how the group dynamics working. Certainly, when you're playing for strangers, you don't really know how to gauge that until like 20 minutes, half an hour into the game. Yeah. Everyone's kind of settled in. But for a regular group, I wouldn't go. I would do the odd silly voice, perhaps, depending upon what's happening. But it's more just kind of, let's see what chaos they can create and try and not kill them off too quickly type stuff. Because normally it's a self-destructive path they take.
Do you change it between kind of encounters and kind of storytelling? Because I know some people that run a campaign to kind of almost tell the story. They're like an easy mode in a video game. If you want to experience the story and don't want to come up to too much hassle, then select this option. And you get people that they're very good. They tell the story, they tell the tale, and they're almost like part of this tale, and it's almost difficult for them to almost fail. Or you get, you meet in a tavern, a fight breaks out.
Yeah, and I mean, it kind of depends on what it is. If it's a one-shot scenario, I've run quite a few one-shots. I ran one recently in Nottingham. I went down to an event in Nottingham for charity. They were a superhero game that I hadn't run before, and I'd owned it for 8 years. It was one of the few things. No, it didn't survive the cull when we left Glasgow. It was one of the things I bought when we moved here, and it was kind of like, right, I've never ran this before. And at Expo last year, I got into a chat about, right, okay, what games have you not ran? And I said, Brave New World by Matt Forbeck. And they were like, oh, you should run that. And I was like, yeah, I should run that, didn't I? and then this event materialised, and I stupidly put my hand up for it. But anyway, no. But that was because that was a one shot. It was kind of like you have to start into the action. You have to give the player something to engage with immediately.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's quite passive. If you're running a campaign, then or even a multi-session story, then it's really a case of, well, let's see what happened last time. It can go slow, it can go fast, it can be high octane, full of explosions, or it can be very narrative based. It really depends on the story. I mean, I ran a D&D game in Edinburgh for 2.5 years that I'd say probably that less than 30% of the sessions actually had a lot of combat in them, because a lot of it was story driven.
Yeah,
that's what the players wanted.
Have you got a favourite edition of D&D then? If you've had, and it sounds like you've played every edition, is there like ones that you kind of hold? You're like, oh, the advanced stuff's the best, or what do you think of the current edition just now? Are you like kind of really loving that, or have you got as a one that you would, if somebody says, right, you're allowed one rule book, what do you take with you?
Yeah, I mean, there is. I mean, I would go first edition, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. It's the version of D&D that I cut my teeth on. Mm-hmm. It's the version of D&D that I played the most. I am, however, a huge fan of the new edition. It's I can't remember who it was. There was a D&D blogger called Chatty DM. I can't remember his real name, but he did a kind of review of 5th edition just as it came out, and I think he got preview copies and stuff like that, and he basically said it's like D&D's greatest hits. They've taken all the good bits from the various previous editions and they've sliced and diced them and chucked them together, and it works. And he's right, it does. It's great. I think it is the best edition of D&D mechanically. It hangs together really well. It's there's a lot going on in the game that you can do. Very flexible system. But if I was to choose one, I'd probably go back to first edition of D&D, just because from a nostalgia perspective, for no other reason.
Yeah, it'd be like putting on it's like finding an old sweater you really liked and just sticking it back on and going, this looks good still, and I kind of can pull it off. I don't look completely ridiculous.
Assuming it still fits you after all these years.
Exactly. So to go around breathing in all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
See, I told you I could get back into this. If you pass out on the floor from like lack of oxygen. Would you, or have you ever considered actually putting together your own little system? I mean, has the experience that you had, have you kind of like thought, well, I could actually do a little bit of this. There could be the kind of my little system kind of. Have you done that? Have you kind of played around with kind of bringing in changes and mods to stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of tinker with games that I'm running. So I I'm not there's a term, rules as written. So in other words, how it's actually written in the book is how you run it. And I'm not that kind of player of a role playing game, or DM or whatever. I tend to tweak it slightly, largely because I don't want to continuously refer back to the rulebook, because that breaks the suspension of disbelief as you're playing the game. And one of the things, when I made reference to Brave New World earlier on, a superhero game, and Matt, if he ever listens, Matt Forbett listens to this, hopefully he forgives me saying this, but the mechanics for Brave New World, it was written in 1999, are awful. So I ripped it apart and rebuilt them from scratch.
Well, he's on next week, so I can tell him.
I have promised to send him my feedback because he is planning to do a second edition of the game.
Well, that'd be cool.
He still owns the rights. So I have said to him, I'll do this. And he was great for it as well. Slight detour here, but I just messaged him and said, "You've got a convention scenario for this, surely, you must have." And he was like, "Yeah, here's the convention scenario." And I was like, "That's like 10 lines." He was like, "That's all you need." I was like, "You know what, you're not wrong. 10 lines and a map, and you can just wing it for the rest of it." And that's essentially what I did when I went down to Nottingham. But I completely rebuilt that mechanically for me, so that it was something I felt familiar with. So it's got, elements of the original game, but it's also got elements of other games.
Mm-hmm.
But I've never had an aspiration to be a game designer. It's never been something from scratch. I've never had that inclination. It's not really been a calling, probably for good reason.
When you had the shop, I mean, is there spaces? Do you think there's spaces for kind of like retail board game establishments, or do they have to kind of be a mixture of kind of social space at the same time? Because all the ones that I see, the new ones that are that seem to be opening up, I mean, as I say, Chaos Cards have opened up their own store, but it still seems to concentrate on having a large social space that people can go into. You've got, is it Common Grounds in Stirling? Again, they've got almost like, this is what you can buy, but this is what you can eat and sit down and have a game.
Yeah, in psychology, there's a term called the third space, or the third place, and so you've got your home and you've got your work, and for people, you've got a third place as well. Not everyone has one, but there tends to be that kind of psychological thing of another place you're comfortable to go to. Mm-hmm. And there's I'm going to go all fancy Dan on you here. There's a guy in the States called Gary Ray who does a blog about his store in California called Black Diamond Games, and he's been blogging about hobby retail for 12, 13 years, and I read it every post. I read it, I digest it, even though I have no plans to go back into hobby retail. It's very interesting stuff, and he writes a lot about the third space. I think to develop that kind of community aspect, to give people a reason to buy from you, you need to offer them something more. If you think about anything that you can buy in your brick and mortar retail store, whether community space or not, the question that tends to come up is, well, what pricing strategy do you have as a brick and mortar store? Well, you know what? You can't compete with an online retailer on price. So how can you compete? You have to give people a reason to want to buy from you. I mean, I tend to buy almost everything from brick and mortar stores partly because I used to be one, I suppose, but I like to support them. I like to make sure they still exist for a variety of reasons. I think having space builds that community, builds that connection. I mean, you've mentioned Steve, Common Ground in Stirling, Steve's store. There's, I'll mention a few stores just now.
Let's give some shout outs to
we've got 3 stores confirmed who are definitely coming to trade at the convention. One of them, which is probably obvious to most that they would be there, but it's let's give them their place. Big Dog Books, Stuart Kane, who owns Big Dog Books in Perth, so the local game and comic shop in Perth, is going to be at the convention. And Stuart's got a good community in his store, a strong community store from a comic book and a gaming perspective. And he has game nights most nights of the week. Then you've got Settlers in Hamilton, which is run by Shaz, who I've known for a few years now, since before I had the store. And Shaheen's, he's very keen to be at the convention. So I don't know if you've been to Settlers. If you even look at the photographs on his Facebook page, the store's much bigger than the photographs give you. It's a great store. He's doing really well. I'm fair chuffed for him. And then we've got West End Games in Glasgow, who are going to be coming as well. Ross, who owns West End Games, they've kind of grown out of nothing in the last kind of 3 years, I think it is, and they're doing really well as well, which is great. So those are 3 retailers that we have confirmed. We are talking to others, because we do want to have a reasonable spread geographically as well, of retailers, but others can't do it. And I think, completely segueing into Tabletop Scotland stuff here, but I think one of the things I've been able to bring to the convention is that engagement with the retailers, having been one. So I can sit down with them, and I've done that with most of them, and actually chatted it through and just said, look, I know this it may not sound like commercially always the right thing to do, or it might be the sort of thing that you don't have a marketing budget for. So just tell me that, and I won't take it the wrong way. But it's really good that the guys who have confirmed have, and that's great. And as I say, we may have 1 or 2 more on top of that, and we're just working that through, which is exciting, because even just having that kind of breadth of retailer across Scotland is really positive. There's so many game stores now in Scotland. It's quite, it's impressive. I'm surprised that there's so many, and they're all doing pretty well, which is really good as well.
And just to reiterate, if anybody is out there who has a game store and they want to come on and have a chat, give us a shout. Happy to always speak to people involved in the hobby, regardless of what part of the hobby that they're in. But, I mean, you're cruising along. You've got the you're running a club, is it, on Sundays up at, is it East Nuke?
Yeah, so in Anstruther on the 2nd, so that kind of came out of nothing. I game at Dwarf, as you know, so the two of us do that. I used to game in Edinburgh on a Saturday, but I stopped that after our daughter was born, because I just couldn't give up my Saturdays for that. So I now give up my Sundays, so that's a bit weird. No, so about 4 years ago, I think I was sick from work or something like that, and I was bored, and I was just doing some random Twitter searches, which I'm sure you do all the time. And I
never on it, never on Twitter,
never. It must be Colin. So I was doing some random Twitter searches in the kind of East Nuke area, and just saying, right, okay, just what is there on Twitter, in this area, and up pops eventually King of Tokyo, and I'm just like, with the hashtag Anstruther, and I'm like, all right, who in Anstruther plays King of Tokyo? And
just a random thing.
And I'm just like, okay, why don't I know them? You think I should know these people. Who are they? So I messaged, and it turned out to be the guy who I've now, Alan Stewart, who his Twitter handle is Don Jondo. I won't spell that because I can't remember how to spell it. But he and I kind of got together over a pint, and we said, we'll just start a games club and see what happens. And that was come April 4 years ago. 2nd and 4th Sunday of the month, East Nuke Tabletop. If you're in Anstruther and you fancy going to the Chippy, then if the games club's on,
everybody goes to the Chippy.
Exactly, come and join us for some board gaming fun. It's going really well. It's because the first session of the new year was just Sunday there, which was great fun.
Do you get quite a lot of regular people then? Do you get like new people kind of come along as well?
We have a core, is what I'd call it. So there's a core group of people who come out almost every time. Then we have people who come infrequently. But we also have lots of people who just turn up and they go, oh, I didn't know you were here. I mean, every so often on a Friday night, I don't do this because I'm normally at Dwarf when this is happening, but they have a role-playing night as well at the same club. And there was a couple from East Weems who we didn't even know we existed, and stumbled across us and have started to come to role-playing. And it's just like, okay. So there's... the impression I get is that given the age of the hobby, and I know I keep using that phrase, but the age of the hobby, it is very much the sort of thing that you're getting people who are second generation gamers and indeed lapsed gamers who are rediscovering it. So that second generation gamer is either dragging their parent along who used to be a gamer, or is just genuinely interested because they've heard their parent talk about it.
Yeah.
Or in the case of one of the guys who's been a kind of core member of Event for a long time, he had kind of stopped gaming in a real sense, or in a regular sense even. And when we started, it was like, oh, great, I can play my board games with different people now. I don't need to just play it with my family or whatever. So yeah, that's worked out really well for us.
So, okay, as I say, you're doing this. You're cruising along. You're turning up at Dwarf on Fridays. Things seem to be going quite well. And then you sit down one day and you got to ask the question, what possessed you to think, we'll do a conference. We'll call it Tabletop Scotland. We're gonna just go out there and invite all different types of people, because there was probably rumblings within your mind for a long time that you were going to be doing it. But what made you, what was the kind of the moment that you sat down and you went, actually, let's do this. And there's the Glasgow Games Festival, which is really nice. There's Edinburgh, which is it Compulsion?
Yes,
I think, or
it's
unless
run
I'm
by
being daft. Yeah.
No, it's Compulsion. It's run by Edinburgh University Student Gaming Society. What possessed me? That is the key question here, I suppose.
It is, yeah.
So there's a potted history to this. So about 4 years ago is where the idea kind of started. And then after about 3 years of struggling to find a venue and struggling to find one that met the very key criteria that I had and had to be cost effective. So we looked at a couple in Edinburgh and almost signed a contract with one in Edinburgh, but we pulled out of it because the financial risk was quite scary at one point. So it became one of those things that I would just continually potter away with the idea, if I ever had a convention, what would I do?
Yeah.
And then I would go to Expo and I would see how they did certain things and see what I could glean from that and what I could see how they did certain things really well. Like, their seminar track that they're trying to build is intriguing. And I'd like to have seminars, and we do have a few seminars, just not ready to announce them yet. I think, and I then kind of took that viewpoint, it's kind of early last year, that to plan a convention, and for those who don't know me, I'm a project manager by trade, so I tend to plan things. Not necessarily to the nth degree, but I like to have a clear idea of when things can happen. And I started.
What is your favourite highlight colour in an Excel spreadsheet?
It's got to be yellow, right? Classic. It's got to be yellow.
It's yellow or nothing.
It's yellow or nothing, exactly.
Give me yellow or give me death.
I mean, unless I'm really trying to show off, I'll go for the kind of neon green, obviously. But that's the.
Would you ever go for, like, say, a magento? Because, I mean, is there anyone that uses that? Because that just makes the text almost impossible to read.
Well, that's the thing, you need to change the colour of the text, but then it's not really a highlight then, is it? It's just changing the background colour. It's more conditional formatting now, I'm sure, of Excel knowledge. Because everybody knows how to use Excel if they work in projects.
No. Well, you probably do. I mean, that's what the print certificate is, isn't it?
Well, yes.
Let's face it.
It's basically...
It's 2 days of solid...
It's Excel 101.
It's 2 days of solid Excel. What do you mean I can do a formula? I can make these columns add together. That's crazy.
A1 plus A2 equals...
Yeah. I can't even do that. I'll never get that certificate.
You can, you just don't want to. But yeah, it was one of the, so I built a spreadsheet because funnily you should say that I built a spreadsheet of every single games event in the UK. In the UK, not in Scotland.
I was only joking.
I know you were. In the UK, and I did it purely from the basis of I had two things on my kind of hobby agenda at the start of last year. One was to go to more events, and two was to essentially either make the decision to do this convention or postpone it. And And I'll come back to make the decision and postpone it in a minute. But the spreadsheet then became a kind of labour of love, and it's still going. It's used in various Facebook groups. So if you've got any people who are on the UK board game trade and chat group on Facebook run by Chris Bromley, it's in the sticky there. That Google Doc is a spreadsheet that I've created, and it has what it's demonstrated is south of the border you have an event for role-playing board games, card games, or combination thereof every weekend practically. There's one every weekend.
That's crazy.
And it's just like, okay, we have two in Scotland. Why? Why did we only have two? So that if nothing else made me go, right, okay, now I know that I kind of have to do this. It was a question of finding a venue. And I'd kind of stopped hunting for a venue, and then the debate with those I'm going to Gen Con with started off, right, we're going next year. This is 2017 at this point. And I was like, yeah, I'll commit to that. So we booked their accommodation to go to Gen Con. Everything was all sorted. And then literally the weekend later, my wife, who owns a wool shop in Pittenweem, came back from Perth Yarn Festival, and said, you should go and have a look at that venue. And I was like, what venue? The Jewish Centre in Perth. You should go and have a look at it. And I was like, okay. So I kind of kicked John and nudged Duncan and just said, right, okay, let's go up to Perth. And I sent them an email and said, look, I'd like to come have a look at your venue. I have no idea what this thing looks like. And John's been involved in this conversation for the past 4 years, right, about having a convention. And Duncan, he's been aware that I've been thinking about it for a while. And Simon's obviously been involved as well. He just couldn't come that day.
So John Harper.
Sorry, John Harper.
John Harper, who has been on the show before.
He has, with Greg.
A long
yes.
time.
Yes,
he was on with Greg, yeah.
Yes, he has. Greg's not involved in this because it's Greg. But I am going to Gen Con with him, or obviously he's coming with me. Yeah, that's more true. He's coming with me. Because I've booked the accommodation that's in my name, so he has to come.
Right, okay.
But yeah, so we went to the venue, and on the way there, John's like, "Oh yeah, I go here every year with my dad." And I was like, "And you didn't think to mention it." Because it's where the Model Wheel Show is, and I was like, "And you didn't think to mention it?"
Oh my goodness, that was awkward in the car.
That was a little bit awkward. But we walked in, had a look around, and within 5 minutes, I was like, "Yep, this will work." It was great, and they wanted us. And then within a flurry of 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks, we pulled together, dusted down all the stuff I'd done before, pulled it all together. I looked at the financials, started to really break it down and go, could this really work? Had some serious adult conversations as a group, went back to see the venue, and then initiated contract discussions formally and went through that process. And then we signed the contract, and then we went public. And that was, and I look at my spreadsheet as we're continuing that theme, that was exactly 88 days ago that we went public. 88 days. That's
88 days.
Doesn't sound that big a number, but it feels like
if you'd been going miles an hour, you would have potentially gone back in time.
But, yeah, very good point.
But I mean, I'm not asking you to tell me cost, but is it quite expensive to put on an event? Is it a sizable risk for you to rock up at a venue and go,
It varies, because the venue is just part of the equation. A venue will come with certain kind of bread and butter stuff like tables and stuff like that, but there's other things that go over and above that. For example, a board game, card game, role-playing convention, you'll find needs a little bit more tables than a bowling event or a dance or a whatever. So obviously as a venue, they don't hold that number of tables. So we need to acquire X number of tables. And each one of those tables is an individual price. So all of these things can add up. You then got things like you need to have public liability insurance, and that needs to cover volunteers. It's not just me and Duncan and John and Simon it needs to cover. It's the volunteers that we have as well. So there's more to it than just grabbing a hall, although you can do it on a small scale like that. But if you're trying to do something of the scale that we want this to grow into, you need to put some proper thought into it, from a better phrase. And it comes with proper spreadsheets.
Is it easier to plan a wedding or plan a conference?
I can't really kind of do that. Me and my wife did our wedding really on the spur of the moment. We just told people, turn up in 4 weeks, everyone's organised, come along. Which my mum is still not happy about. But
all right. Did you not think of doing that for Tabletop Scotland?
No. No.
Imagine that. So effectively you are spending more time organising your tabletop event than you are your own wedding.
You're doing that. But yeah, you're right. That's terrible.
Did you have a spreadsheet for your wedding?
No. To be fair, more people are going to come to this than came to my wedding. So that's probably just
imagine that. That's a point of argument. Hey, you couldn't even be bothered making a spreadsheet for our wedding.
To be fair, I left most of that to Fiona. She's the more organised.
She reminds you that every time.
Yes, she does.
So have you got to think about, do you end up with a list? Because you're like, do you continually get surprised by the venue guys saying, are you wanting tablecloths or not? Kind of thing. Do you need chair covers? No. Do you need, that kind of thing?
It's one of those things. I think each venue is different. I think it's what I've learned. And one of the things, we recently announced that UK Games Expo are a partner for the convention, and the partnership arrangement we have with them is that they are basically my go-to people for help and advice and guidance. And I spent an hour and 15 minutes in the forum with Richard and Tony, and a big part of that was them going, does he actually know what the hell he's talking about? Which was great, because I needed someone that wasn't someone that knows me to do that. But one of the things that came up in the conversation that kind of struck a chord with me was Tony talked about power quite a lot, in the sense of how much are you paying for power, how much are you paying per socket, and I'm like, I'm not. It's part of the rations with the venue. And he's like, I don't understand this. So I was like, Tony, you're dealing with NEC. That's why you need to think about power. I'm not dealing with the NEC.
The NEC's like across about 3 time zones, for goodness sake.
Well, exactly. You know it's kind of like that's why the NEC charges you for power, because they have to, probably.
You can get to the airport and you can get to the train station and you can effectively get to London
you're still in the
by
NEC.
Walking out the front door, and you're still in the NEC,
And it's a great, but I suppose in some respects, overly talking about our partnership with them, but they've come a long way, because they started off in an event that they originally thought would have 400 people and had 800 people turn up to it. That was 13 years ago. So it's kind of like, don't get me wrong, this is never going to be as big as the Expo, because I just don't think Scotland can sustain that. But, let's see where it goes. It's kind of where my head is.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. The, has this kind of spurred you on to think about other kind of events? You've the Tabletop Scotland one, and we'll go into more detail about what you're going to be bringing to that. Has that kind of opened you up to thinking, well, maybe there's opportunities to do it in other parts of the country? Is it worthwhile kind of partnering up with other people and maybe doing one that was slightly towards the border?
It's interesting that, because you're right. There is something there. There's nothing tangible yet, but it's the sort of thing that when I started to kind of speak to my network within the kind of Scottish gaming community, there was a couple of people who had said, actually, I was thinking about doing something as well, but you're far much further down the road than I was, than they were. I was much further down the road than they were even. So they were like, on you go. And that is the sort of thing that, to go back to there's only 2 a year in Scotland, or 3 now with Tabletop Scotland. But it's like, it would be great if there was one every month, or one every 2 months. Having 6 a year would be fantastic.
Yeah.
And having them, geographically spread, ideally, because then it's, Central Belt's where, 70% of the Scottish population live. But the beauty of a place like Perth is public transport routes where pretty much anywhere goes through Perth.
Yeah, it's pretty much a couple of hours away from the furthest point.
Exactly. So but I think I wouldn't rule it out, but I wouldn't. Knowing what I'm like, as my team, as I refer to them, know and have learned to know more, I wouldn't like to put my hand up and say I'll organise that. I'm happy to help provide guidance and support, which is something I did when I had the shop as well. When I closed the shop, a number of people who were looking at opening up brick and mortar stores who came to me and said, "What went wrong?" And, because I want to learn from your mistake, and I did that. And I would do the same. So if there is anyone who's thinking about starting a gaming convention, as long as you're avoiding the months of August and September in Scotland, and maybe October, and November for Glasgow Games Festival, obviously. So you kind of want to make sure they're spaced out, and I'm happy to provide whatever input you want. Just wait until I've got this year out the way first.
Yeah. No, I think in all honesty, I think obviously you've got Aircon, which is Harrogate, which isn't, obviously you can't say it's like a million miles away.
It's not.
But I guess the only thing I don't know, it's a little gonna be in my bonnet, is that there are so many content creators who are not based in London.
Yeah, you're right.
That would love the opportunity to actually be sitting in front of kind of certain game designers. And I know it's kind of like, well, you've got to have the audience there in order to kind of like attract kind of like certain names and stuff like that. But at the same time, unless you stick your neck out and you set up something kind of, Newcastle, something like that.
Well, yeah,
one of
the guys who I spoke to at Expo actually last year, I was chatting away with him, and I think we were both standing at the bar. Funnily enough, I was at the bar.
What day was it?
All of them. And
was it 3 o'clock already?
Yeah, well, and it was very much just chatting away. This guy who was there primarily role playing, he was like, "I really wish there was something like this in the Newcastle area." And I just said to him, "Well, why don't you start one?" He was like, "Oh, no," and I was like, "Why not?" Because it is that kind of, well, if nobody else is going to do it, then I'll do it type thing. That's part of the motivation behind this for me.
But do you not also think that when people think of expos, when people are thinking of things like that, exhibitions, then people are thinking about the UK Games Expo. They're thinking about something that's 2 halls wide. And they forget that actually when a lot of these places kind of started off. The Glasgow Games Festival was pretty much across 2 floors. So, and it was still very, very busy. It was still a lot of fun. And I guess I'd be daunted to think I need to be attracting. You would think, well, how many? I guess it's like, well, how many footfall is a good footfall? Is having 400 people a good footfall? Is having 800 people have a good footfall?
A good footfall is one that doesn't lose you money, right?
Yes.
In simple business terms, and this is a business discussion to an extent. If if you have to hire a venue to do something and you want to not lose money out of that. If you take the example of the Tabletop Day event that we had at Dwarf, which we'll be having again 28th of April this year, which I'm also organising for my sins. But
you got another spreadsheet for that?
Not yet.
I like the fact that it's not yet.
I do have a floor plan laid out for it though. Not in Excel. Another piece of software. But
I took it. Mark from Wreck and Rune Frame will be along.
I haven't reached out to anybody yet, so that's something I need to do because we've only started. So it's a tangent there, right? So we've only just started because Greg's been nagging me to actually look at this and say, right, okay, less than just over 3 months to go. I actually need to do something about it, right? Okay, fair enough. It's my idea that we're doing this, so I need to actually do it, which is fine. And I fully expect. Last year we had One Free Elephant, Wreck and Ruin, Inspiring Games, and Bad Cat Studios at it. And it would be great for all 4 of them to come back. And if Keith McLaren from with I think it's Nuts and Bolts is his game, Cardboard and Coffee. If Keith wants to come as well, and all of them will be getting messages from me probably over the next few days just to say this is what we're doing, this is when we're doing it. If you can make it, great. I think the thing with that event, I think what we were saying is that had 76 people come through the door. And that was a success as far as I was concerned, because more than 50% of those people were not Dwarf regulars. That is a success to me.
And that's what you want.
Yeah.
You want kind of the inklings because you want them to come back to the event. You want them to remember the event for next time, and then come along as new kind of fresh, and introduce people to the hobby.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we still need to be introducing people to the hobby. I mean, going back to the, when you're running a shop,
yes,
it's all very well having the same regulars coming in, but you've got to balance up them coming in and hanging about with you and having a good chat, and not actually spending any money. And it's like, you're a really good mate in that, but I kind of need you.
Well, and that was, without making me cry, obviously, that was part of the kind of the problem that we had with Kingdom Adventure. Was it ended up turning almost into a bit of a clubhouse, which was like, well, actually, no, this isn't what it's for. It's actually there to make money. And some people, for some reason or another, don't like that phrase. But no, this is a business, guys. It has to make money. And it's just, to be honest, it's the same with the convention. If it breaks even, I'll be happy. If it makes a little bit of a loss, as long as it's a little bit of a loss, I'll be happy. But ideally, it makes money. And then that means we can go to the next level for the next year, and then the next level for the year after. And it just enables us. It's never, ever going to make enough money. And, to be a living, to be clear about that. Because, if you look at Expo, it only now is at that stage that it's doing that, right? In the last kind of 2-3 years. It's only now at that stage for Richard and Tony. But for this is a pastime that I'm filling all of my free time with, that might make money to enable me to go, right, next time we do this. Or, as kind of Richard or Tony, it was probably Richard that said, it might fund a trip to Essen for you. Well, actually, what it might do is it might fund a trip to Gen Con for me. No, Greg, that is not me saying I'm going to Gen Con next year. Because he will use that against me.
We're building up Greg to be some kind of horrific Minotaur type character who stomps about the corridors with his horns out of his head and steam escaping from his nostrils. And he's just not like that at all.
A number of things I've written down in a message to him that he has then photoshopped or photographed and then played back to me 6 months later saying, no, you said this. I'm like, yeah, I didn't.
Does he not? Because he tells me before I ever speak to him, he says, now remember that all conversations will be recorded.
That is a regret. That is a regret.
He's not writing the kind of the full thing. I mean, I take it selling. Is there a point where you're like, well, is the break even point? You got to sell a lot of tickets to break even. Are you relying on a lot of footfall, or are you do you have to I guess you've got a balance between charging people to have stands and making sure it's attractive enough to them, but also make sure it's covering enough of the cost so if you're getting good ticket sales, at least you can sit there and go, yep, this is us covered, everything else is kind of gravy. Or is it quite close? Is it quite a fine line that you're getting to?
There's a tipping point in the numbers where you get to it's quite a difficult thing to explain without showing in some respects, but so the space we've got is split up over, there's a main hall which is 36 metres by 36 metres. It's a pretty big room. I can't remember what that is in feet. People tend to ask me that, and I end up having to look at a PDF that I've got on my laptop. So that's 14,000 square feet. So it's a fair amount of space. And on top of that, we've got another roughly 5,000 square feet in other spaces that we can utilise. And if we sell 300 to 400 tickets, everything's in the main hall. And that would be fine. Everything would work. It would be in a space that it would still be a pretty decent event. What I'd like is for it to go a little bit more than that, and for us to then go, well, actually, we're in the upstairs as well, because it breaks things up, especially from a role-playing perspective. So from a call to arms point of view, it'd be really good if we sold more than 400 tickets. Not from a break-even perspective, but just to give a better experience for the attendee. And because it makes it commercially viable for us to go, well, we'll take that room as well, we'll take that room as well, and we'll take that room over there. Then everything's not in one room. And you can siphon certain things off, like the role playing from a noise perspective, or the tournaments that we're having from a noise perspective.
Yes,
stuff like that.
Okay.
So yeah, that's we publicly talk about a number, and we privately talk about different numbers.
Of course you do.
We know how big this could be, and we know, we know what we could fit into the space, and we know what we're comfortable with from a top level perspective. But it's stuff like that you're kind of like, right, okay, but we don't need to be public about that. We need to see how our ticket sales are, and if they go really well, then we go, right, okay, it's the second plan or it's the third plan, because as I'm sure you're not surprised, I've got all these broken down in lovely floor plans.
Are you using Lilac to highlight anything?
Let me just check, actually. Let me open up Room Arranger.
We could do. We could
I do have Lilac. You're right. I won't say who it's for, but yes.
I'm genuinely quite I'm quite thrilled that I got that one right. I'm also kind of
disturbed?
I thought, no, not at all. Lilac's a nice colour, and it's also light enough so it doesn't hide the black font as well. Whereas red will be too glaring, and also you'll look at it and be a bit scared and say, why have I highlighted that in red?
Yeah, you'll think something's going wrong.
Exactly. You're talking about space. What's going to be in the space? What can we expect to see? I'm not asking for exclusives.
I have some for you, but it's fine. So what did we? I suppose. Let me before I say anything more on what I've got to share. Is what did I want to do with this? And some of this is me, and some of this is a team. Right? We had a vision of what this could be, and it was essentially saying I didn't want it to be X, I wanted it to be Y, right? So it was more of I don't want it to just be this. I want it to be more. And whenever I say that out loud, it always feels like I'm criticizing someone. It's not what I mean. For me to want to run an event like this, it had to be something special. Otherwise, it was kind of like, well, why would I bother? So we deliberately targeted certain companies, and Geek and Sun was one of those companies. And we were like, we really want you to come to Scotland, because you've not been to Scotland, because there aren't enough shows in Scotland for you to want to come. So therefore, we want to be the first. And they were so receptive, so supportive, and so interested. It was quite scary that they were taking us so seriously. It helps. It helps though, that Duncan knows them, because Duncan has worked on their stand at Essen, because Duncan also speaks German. It was really helpful that we had that connection already, but they still could have just said, no, not interested.
I just imagine, right, there was a kind of a collection of kind of like wood shavings and tools and some kind of like tarpaulin and some cloth, and then all of a sudden the phone started ringing underneath and it was kind of muffled. People went, hang on, that's a Scottish phone.
We won't answer that.
Somebody's phoning from Scotland. And they quick ripping everybody off and went, hello.
They do have email as well.
But no, that's better. All right, they kind of checked the dusty folder that had Scotland inquiries on it.
And I think so within the space. So I'll give you the first reveal that I've got here. So we will have, as they're now called, Asmodee UK, there. Purely from a demonstration perspective. So they will be running between 6 and possibly 10 tables of demonstration. The 6 to 10 depends on a number of factors, but we've given them X amount of space, and they've said, we want you to come and run demos, which is great. They do that. A lot of shows do that at Glasgow Games Festival.
Yeah.
And that's really good. I happen to know two of their demonstrators, and also their organised play guy used to be my account manager. So that's quite useful that I'm able to just phone him and go, you remember me?
Exactly.
He's hating me right now, I think. But anyway, never mind, because I've just asked him for so many different things. Because Asmodee owned the whole hobby, obviously.
I heard a figure to say today that even the turnover of Asmodee kind of still pales in significance compared to what Games Workshop are doing, because Games Workshop seem to have pulled it out of the bag. And if you kind of add up what Asmodee are doing and Fantasy Flight are doing and everything like that, then still Games Workshop are towering over them with their orc-headed axe and going, grok.
I'm sure, and GW has had a resurgence in the Renaissance even in the last couple of years. They're not coming. We are, however, hosting a Shadespire tournament. But that isn't an exclusive because I mentioned that in Unlucky Frog, and we've gone public with that. But so GW are very much, they've changed their model and okay, they're still doing their 40k in their fantasy or their Age of Sigmar. It's not called fantasy anymore. But they're also doing lots of board games as well, and Shadespire seems to have hit that kind of hybrid GW board game player. Which sounds some sort of sci-fi movie from the 80s. But that is very much how that attracts to us, because from a board game, being quite simple about it, floor planning, right, logistics, board games take up less space than war games. Which is why we're not doing war games in year one. Because we can fit so much more into the space. So what else is in the hall? That was kind of your key question. So
it was.
We'll have Geek and Sun with their big area, as with the UK with their big area. We'll have two of the three retailers that I mentioned. So that'll be Settlers Hamilton and Big Dog Books in that area. West End Games are in a different space of the hall beside the role playing, assuming the role playing's in a different space, which it will be, he says confidently.
Okay.
We'll also have, and I know you know Kevin Young from Inspiring Games, but Inspiring Games will be there. They'll be Scottish-based game design company. Inspiring Games, they'll be in attendance with Legends Untold and other games they're going to have. They're going to be demonstrating Legends Untold, obviously. Depending on fulfillment, let's hope, as a backer personally, let's hope it's out by then so that they can actually have the product there as well. That would be fantastic.
Yes.
There are a number of other publishers that I am not going to name that we are talking to, two in quite advanced conversations with, one which I think will make people stand up and pay attention. If Geek and Sun didn't make them stand up and pay attention. So I won't say anything more about that because the people involved will kill me.
You don't want to jinx it as well.
There is that as well. There is that nervousness with this. But I mean, we're aiming to have 4 retailers in the hall, so that's another 2 retailers to be revealed, right? Essentially, because we've got 2 in the hall, and Ross and West End Games will be upstairs beside the role playing. Another 2 retailers in the hall. That's what we're aiming for, and we're confident we'll get those 2. Because there's more than 2 that we're talking to, and they know who they are. We will have the Bez from Stuff by Bez will be there. We've got Kerry, who's tabletop crafter, so she'll have her stand there. In the hall, we're also going to have a games library, which brings me to another announcement. So we started looking at a games library quite early on and saying, well, how would we do this? And it was actually something I spoke to Richard and Tony about, and they gave me a couple of suggestions, but none of those suggestions were a Scottish-based suggestion.
Oh, right, okay.
Right, I wanted a Scottish-based suggestion. One that wasn't me and Duncan bigging all of our games, basically. Because that would have just been a bloody nightmare. So I've made it somebody else's nightmare. The Willa Glasgow Games Festival, in the 10 hours I was there, having only played about an hour's worth of games the whole time I was there, one of the reasons for that was I sat down with Kenny Lee, who runs the Dice Roll Cafe, which is a pop-up games cafe in the CCA in Glasgow, and I keep forgetting what that stands for. Creative Arts, Contemporary and Creative Arts in Glasgow. And Kenny...
I was thinking County Court, something or other, but that's because I'm a criminal.
But Kenny has a lot of board games. So he's agreed to come on board, and no pun intended, to do the games library, and also to act as a convention partner. So that's a relationship we want to foster and we want to grow, and to help him promote Dice Roll Cafe, but also as we grow as a convention, we want to sustain that relationship with him. So the games library will have, currently, we're looking at roughly 250, if not 300 games in it. We have more than that, but we're trying to scale this accordingly. We don't want to have 500 games there and find that 200 don't get used.
Yes.
So it's kind of like, so we're going for roughly 250, which would be great, and that's going to not be a small amount of space that takes up. So if you're going to have 250 board games there, how much open play space are you going to have? Yeah, so that comes back to if everything isn't in the hall, right, then we can have probably in the region of 420 seats of open play, right? So that's for open play. That's just people sitting down and playing whatever they like. So that's 420 seats. That's quite a big number. So it's giving a scale element of this. This is what people come and do at these things. They come and play board games. So here's 420 seats for you. Go and sell them. And that I think, alongside the having a games library of that size, is just another kind of big part of the whole. It will give it its atmosphere. It will give it its purpose in certain respects, as well as having the exhibitors, whether that's retailers or publishers or whatever, is giving it its purpose. I'm looking at the floor plan now to see what else I can talk about.
Exactly.
No, I can't. I mean, it's essentially, if you think of the hall as combination open play and exhibitor hall, right? That's essentially what it's going to be. We're going to have a couple of other bits to that. So like Tabletop Scotland stuff with T-shirts and stuff that you can get. We're going to have a gateway element to that. So there's going to be a team who either as part of or as an extension of this DVM setup, who will be there primarily to help people who are completely new to the hobby, and really just help them get on board with that. So we already have someone who's going to lead that. It's not one of the team. It's essentially an extended team member who's going to manage that and look after that. And that's great. That's something that we're really keen to do. Because because coming to these things, if you're already a gamer, you kind of work on the assumption, well, okay, I kind of know what I need, and I kind of know what to do. And one of the questions we ask when people buy tickets is, how experienced are you? And we want people to be honest with that. I don't want people to say they're complete experts if they've played Pandemic 3 times. You know, I want them to be honest so that we can then say, right, okay, our gateway capability needs to be X. So that helps us support them. What else? And that's kind of the main hall. Over and above that, 15 plus tables of role-playing games over 5 slots. So that's a potential. I didn't do the math beforehand. Damn, I should have done the math beforehand. Where am I? Calculator. That'll do. 6 times 15 times 7. So that's a potential 630 seats of role-playing game over the whole weekend. That's not unique. Good. That's turnstile, essentially. So you think about that.
Yeah.
But per slot, that's 15 times 6. That's 90 seats of role-playing per slot. So that, and we've got 5 slots over the weekend. So it's that isn't what have I done wrong there? I've done that wrong. No, I've not done that wrong. Doesn't matter. So you can tell I'm doing this on the hoof. It's not on the spreadsheet. Damn, see you.
I know. I've just wrecked it. Absolutely destroyed it.
But yeah, having 15 tables of role playing is pretty impressive. And to go back to the beginning of this conversation, I am a role player at heart, so that's really important to me that we have a large role playing thing. And when we secured the D&D Epic, which has actually turned into more questions than there's a lot of excitement about it, but also people are going, what do you mean by an epic? And I'm happy to explain that if you want. But having the epic, first ever D&D epic in Scotland, again, is one of those things that, wow, that's exciting. Because when I went to Gen Con in 2014, I went to the first ever epic, and that was amazing. So, to explain it quickly, an epic is a shared story across multiple tables where things that occur at each table can affect other parts of the story, right? So the example I can give is the one I've played in, which was 100 tables. We're not having that, obviously, at Tabletop Scotland, but 100 tables at Gen Con, where you had people fighting against goblins in a certain part of a castle and other things. But if the battle wasn't going quickly enough, i.e. the heroes weren't winning quickly enough, then the Green Dragon broke free and it did bad things. And stuff like that. So you kind of track people, there's like floor walkers that move between the tables to see how are things progressing. right, okay, we've got to this stage. Have they achieved this? No. Right, okay, this happens. And so you have this kind of mega plot that hangs around the whole thing. And it's really, really cool. I loved it as an experience. And having Ross, who owns West End Games in Glasgow, and Greg Foster, who's my kind of AL Adventurers League, D&D Adventurers League coordinator, managed that for me, because I have to give it to somebody, otherwise I'll do it myself, because it's close to my heart. But it's great that I've got people who know how to do this, because Greg runs the AL up in Dundee, and Ross obviously runs it in his store. And that in itself is just really exciting. And it's another kind of buzz thing that we've got for the convention. Well, I'm trying to think of what else. I've got two more things that I can talk about from an announcement, but I'm conscious that I'm just rabbiting on. I know you're just letting me, but is there anything?
I just like you. You sound absolutely, totally excited with this.
I am.
Very, very, very good. What's the date? When's it going to be?
Yeah, we've not talked about that, and it's actually something that I keep forgetting to mention when I talk to people. So, Tabletop Scotland is on the 1st and 2nd of September, 2018. So it's the first weekend in September. It is the doors open at 9 a.m. on a Saturday, and they close at 11:30 p.m. on the Saturday. So it's quite a late thing. And then on the Sunday, it opens again at 9 o'clock, and the doors close at 6 on the Sunday. Some of the exhibitors will start breaking down about 4 o'clock probably. But yeah, it's a long weekend of activity. And we'll be there, probably not sleeping at all the whole weekend. But, you know, running on adrenaline and coffee. But, you know, that's part of the excitement and the buzz out of it. It's having an event like that. And the venue itself, the Jura Centre, which is 10 minutes walk away from the railway station, the park and ride at Broxden, just outside Perth. The bus from the park and ride stops right outside the venue, and we got informed in a recent meeting with Perth Council that the park and ride currently only runs on a Saturday, but it's actually going to be running on the Sunday as well. Not just for our event, that's something they're reintroducing in general. But that's really good. Cool.
Good.
So we're just waiting on a bit more information on, when is the first bus, that sort of stuff. The Perth bus station and railway station are both literally 10 minutes walk away from the venue. Mm-hmm. The venue's got 400 parking spaces on site as well, and there's various other options to park in Perth, and it's walkable from the town centre very easily, and it's really exciting. And really cool, because
when do tickets go on sale?
So tickets go on sale. There's 2 key dates beyond the actual event itself. So 31st of January, so in 15 days from now that we're recording this. You can feel free to edit that later. But 15 days.
Dave, I don't edit.
Yes.
You know, I top and tail this with some music and just throw it out there. I take out any of the bits that I sound a bit stupid.
Well, that's fine. Do that with me.
I'll leave in the spreadsheet chat.
Obviously. Don't forget to highlight magenta. But the ticket sales go on sale. Tickets go on sale on the 31st of January at 8 p.m. or 2000 hours, depending on you like your 24 hour or not. The other key date is the 31st of March. So that key date is when events start to be bookable. So right now, and one of the key questions I keep getting asked is, why are you not selling tickets already? And as I've already touched on, we've been public for, 89 days or 88 days? 88 days? I can't even remember. Let me look at the spreadsheet. 88 days. We deliberately, it's not necessarily, decided that we'd go public and we'd build momentum and try and lock in some exhibitors before we start selling tickets, because otherwise we don't have anything for people to want to come for. So we deliberately did it that way. At the same time, from an event perspective, because our initial focus is on exhibitors, and events to an extent, we wanted to get as many events locked in before the 31st of March to enable people to have a choice of what they want to do at certain times of the day. If indeed they want to come to the events, they might just want to sit and play board games all day from the library, which is perfectly fine. Or indeed sit in Inspiring Games' booth and get demoed Legends Untold by Kev all day. That'd be quite amusing. But I think the event calendar piece is quite key. It's one of the challenges when you're building a website for an event like this, is getting something that works. But to be clear, none of the events, with one exception, will be charged for. And that exception right now is likely to be the Catan UK qualifier, because of the nature of it, the prize support for that.
It's official tournament and stuff like that. You always have to hand over a bit of cash,
a bit of something. Yeah, I mean, the weekend ticket's £15 for adults. We've got a family ticket, we've got a young adult ticket, and kids 10 under come free. So we've kind of borrowed UK Games Expo's.
That's a very generous age though. Yes, that's good, because that does encourage. Cause there's nothing like, that'll be 2 adults taking their 3 kids with them. It'll be £30. If you go to any other place, it'd be like, if they're over 17 months,
exactly,
charge them as an adult.
Exactly.
Kind of thing.
It was one of those things. We actually went around in circles with that a couple of times as a team, and it was like, well, actually, let's just look at what Expo do. And they were fine with it. So it's kind of like, right, okay, we'll just do that. I think the one of the other tournament events that we're going to have, so Catan won the UK qualifier, I've already mentioned here. We've gone public with the Shadespire one, which I've also mentioned here. We're also going to have a Karuba tournament, which is a game by Haba, who, as a German-based company, have been marvellous to deal with. Absolutely amazing to deal with. They're being so helpful with this. It's unbelievable. I wasn't expecting this level of help, and it was one of those speculative emails. You go, they won't be able to come. They won't be able to help us because they're in Germany. But no, they're supplying us the copies of Karuba that we need for the tournament. They're providing us with all of the prize support we need for it, and that's fantastic. It's just like excellent. Let's see where this goes. But Karuba is one of my games of the last 2 years. So if you don't know what it is, it's Bingo Indiana Jones, which is really the most rubbish description of it possible.
But potentially it is.
But it is Bingo Indiana Jones, because one player calls a number on a tile, and everyone has to place that tile to try and get their explorers to the temples. So there you go. That's why it's Bingo Indiana Jones. But what we'll be able to do with the copies we'll have is have a 32-player tournament of it and have someone, probably John, be the bingo caller. He may or may not be an Indiana Jones or a bingo caller outfit, to be confirmed.
I think bingo caller outfit.
It might even be a hybrid. Who knows?
I'm sensing Britney Spears toxic.
Oh, that's not an image of use, Richard. Thank you very much.
There you go. If people have listened along tonight and they say, right, I want to keep up to speed with what's happening with this fine event, where's the easiest way, or where can we find you on the interweb nets?
Right. So our various locations are, we have the website, which is ultimately the golden source of all information. If it's not on the website, we've done something wrong, which is www.tabletopscotland.co.uk. We're on Facebook as Tabletop Scotland, so just the / Tabletop Scotland. We're on Twitter as Tabletop Scot, because it doesn't let you do Tabletop Scotland, it's too long. And we're on Instagram as Tabletop Scot as well. And if anyone can tell me why or how to use Instagram effectively, I'd much appreciate it, because I just don't know. But we also have a MailChimp newsletter, and I bring that up because the amount at times, and there are times when we're probably bombarding people with information because we have quite a lot to kind of communicate and share. And what we do with the newsletter is we kind of backtrack over the previous 4 to 6 weeks and say, right, okay, we announced these things. Here's just to make sure that if you're not watching our Facebook or Twitter, or even watching the website as it changes over time, it's all in that newsletter. because we don't want people to miss things. And it's not just the announcements about exhibitors. It's things like our terms and conditions for attendees. It's just making sure that people have that visibility, because I don't want to not communicate about it, because that's normally one of the first complaints that people have is, you never told us that. Well, if I give everyone the opportunity to see these things, then that should hopefully be less of a problem. So yeah,
and we'll make sure that we put all the notes and all the links in the show notes, so we've got notes to show.
Exactly, because you need notes to show to have show.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming on, sir.
No worries. I do have one thing that I want to give you as an exclusive, right?
What's that then? Yeah.
Right. So when we start selling tickets on the 31st of January, one of the things we're going to be doing is essentially having some sort of raffle. We haven't quite worked out the mechanics of this raffle, but there is going to be a number of different prizes. And one of the prizes is from Geek and Son. No, it's not a table before people get too excited, although I'll come back to that. They're providing what they call a game night hamper, which is essentially, it's a board game, there's snacks, there's wine, there's various accessories, and a Geek and Son accessories and a voucher as well for Geek and Son stuff. I did mention the wine, yeah, because that's important, I think, from playing board games. But and that's really, really great, and it's a sign of the support they're giving us. But then to go back to the table, on the weekend of the convention, if you're there, so you have to buy a ticket, obviously, you can enter a raffle to win a table over the weekend. So by the end of the convention, someone will have won a Geek and Son table.
How are they going to get it home, David?
Well, it'll be shipped.
How are they going to get it home?
Wherever they've come from.
As they're on the bus.
It'll be shipped to them. We're not going to ask them.
Never get that on the bus.
Well,
never get that on the bus. The driver's going to look at you and going to say you're going to have to pay for another adult.
You might not be able to lift it onto the bus, to be fair. But, well, I wouldn't. Certainly not.
Just imagine somebody saying, I brought my bike.
I've wrapped it up in really big cardboard.
Put one of those red flashy tingly lights behind it, kind of thing, so the cars don't hit you. Get a proper bike light, mate.
Exactly. But yeah, and that's really good. That's again, that I can't thank them enough, even just for coming to the convention in the first place. But the level of support they're bringing is really good as well. So I wanted to make sure we got that.
Absolutely. No, as I say, we will. We'll make sure all the information that people want to see is proliferated throughout the various media channels that we run as well. So, and as normal, we will also be as we come up to the event, the first one for Tabletop Scotland. You'll be seeing kind of noise from ourselves as well. We'll be making sure that everybody's aware of the good work that Dave and the team are going to be doing. To keep an eye on us, if you want to find out what we're doing, what we're up to, and where we're going, you can find us on Twitter, which is We're Not Wizards. You can find us we're on Instagram. Just like Dave, we have no idea how it works. It's photographs and stuff, but we just put things up there. That is also We're Not Wizards. We're on Facebook, which is We're Not Wizards. You can email us, which is magic@we'renotwizards.com or .co.uk. You can find us on YouTube if you go to youtube.com/c/ We're Not Wizards Tabletop Podcast. All of our podcasts go on YouTube because of Podbean, which is our lovely podcast host. You can find us on Acast, you can find us on Stitcher, you can find us on Spreaker, you can find us on Podknife, you can find us on Apple Podcasts as well. If you like what you've heard this evening, today, thanks very much for listening. It would be brilliant if you jump over to iTunes and drop us a quick subscription. If you like us even more, feel free to drop us a rating or even write us a review. Now, as we say, don't give us 10 stars because that makes us big-headed. But don't give us 1 because that makes us cry. Give us somewhere in the middle, like a 5. Because it is average, and we are decidedly average. But who's not being average tonight is the rather wonderful, the rather fantastic, a gentleman who I've spent quite a few hours playing some cardboard with, is the rather wonderful, Mr. Dave Wright. So thank you very much, Dave, for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure. There are only a couple more things to do. Remember, the first thing is that we are many things, but we're not wizards. Are we wizards? Absolutely not. And the second thing is to say bye-bye. So it's a goodbye from Dave. Say goodbye, Dave.
Goodbye, Dave.
Every single time. Works like a charm. And it's a good... You're not the first person that's done that.
No, I'm sure not.
Can I just point out that, when I say goodbye to somebody, they always go, oh, goodbye. Okay. And the second thing is it's a goodbye from me. But remember, stay safe. Roll sixes. If you're in Scotland, if you fancy taking a holiday, if you're in America and you're, sick of going to American conventions, take a flight over to Scotland, to Perth, because it's lovely. And it's got hills and stuff. And it's got culture and castles. And, and it's also going to have Tabletop Scotland going on as well. And it sounds absolutely fantastic. And we shall definitely be there. Obviously hiding our faces because we're not the best looking bunch in the world. But make sure if you are in the area to come and check it out, because it sounds like it's going to be an awful lot of fun, and you've also got a chance of winning a Geek and Sun table, which you can't go wrong with that. But until the next time, my good people, goodbye. Say goodbye, Dave.
Goodbye.
Yay!